Good morning, Commissioner Lytle. Can you hear us okay here in the room?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Kathy.
Great, thank you. We can hear you good too.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock by my iPad, anyway. I'll call the meeting of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District Commission to order. We have one commissioner participating virtually. That's Commissioner Lytle. All of the other commissioners, 8 of them, are in the room. So, welcome to all of our guests. I do know that we have an item on Badger Mill Creek. We'll take any appearances people want to speak on that under the appearances by the public, and we'll do our consent calendar and move on to other items. Cassie, would you like to go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Good morning, commissioners, members of the public, and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. While the commission and staff are in person, we are still offering a Zoom option so members of the public can attend. If you're attending virtually and would like to speak, you can do so during appearances by the public. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube, and the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. Finally, commissioners, please use your microphones while speaking and make sure your voice is directed towards the mic. When you're not speaking, please ensure your mic is off, that the light is turned off, so others can utilize the mics. As a reminder, only 3 of the table mics can be live at a time. Also, please state your name before speaking for those who may be joining us via Zoom. Those are the decorum rules of the District Commission. Thank you for following them, and let's have a great meeting.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. Now we'll have there are no announcements, so we'll move on to item 2, excuse me, which is appearances by the public. Anybody from the public wish to speak? Do you have a few minutes?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, commissioners, for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Jamie Aulick. I am the city administrator of the city of Verona. I wanted to note this morning that regarding the Badger Mill Creek, as we've gone through this process, one of the biggest surprises to us was learning that the effluent flow into the creek has actually been shut off since last August. I know I can't ask questions, but I'm wondering if the commissioners were aware of that. The letter to CARPC about the water quality amendment approval was dated September 9th, 2024, and we were still having stakeholder meetings into October, and this important action was never mentioned to that group. Further, last year we spoke with someone at the DNR and came away with the impression that the water would continue flowing until this spring. Regardless, since then we've noticed a significant drop in the creek's water level. This change is concerning not only from an environmental standpoint, but also because there was no public communication about the earlier shutoff. We would appreciate clarification on when exactly the flow was stopped, why the flow was stopped, and whether there are plans to restore it in the near future. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Jason Valerius. I'm the Executive Director of the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, CARPC. I don't have much to share. I just wanted to, I'm here because of the Badger Mill Creek item is on the agenda this morning, just to listen to the conversation. I recognize that this is a topic that's still kind of in limbo in various ways, and that it isn't, from my understanding, a necessity that this be on your agenda right now, and that there are aspects of this issue that would maybe be, that can't be fully talked about in a public setting yet because they're in the legal system. I want to thank you for putting it on your agenda because I think this has always been a challenging topic with a lack of, a genuine lack of clarity about what the right path is technically, politically, financially. Maybe that one's a little easier to figure out, but it's not a given that you would be talking about this today because there are other processes underway right now that you could be waiting for. But we appreciate that you're willing to put it on the public agenda, have some discussion about aspects of it, and be a little more transparent and open and engage in dialogue about what is happening right now and the things that you can talk about. So we would like to engage with you. We have been engaging with you, have been working with staff on getting through this process, helping MMSD to evaluate and confirm the satisfaction of the conditions of that approval, and we will continue to do so. So that was it. Thank you for having this up for discussion today.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Anyone else? Okay. Let's see. That will take us to the consent calendar. What we're going to do is move item E, 3E, off the topics because that requires a roll call vote. I'm aware of it after they put it on the agenda. So does anybody have any questions on items A through D and F of the consent calendar? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
This is Commissioner Freeze. I'll move approval.
Motion by Commissioner Freeze.
Commissioner Clark, I'll second.
Second by Commissioner, I was going to say Brad, and then he was pointing down. Okay, motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by Commissioner Clark to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to the item 3E, which was moved down to topics. Bill, you want to just say a few things or not?
I'll just say a few words, including explaining what happened here. President Hubble and I talked about this. We put this on consent because the content of this item is fairly small, and then one of my staff noticed that the resolution presents itself as having been adopted by a roll call vote, so we thought we should probably do that. So we pulled it off. The basics of this you saw in the car. We have to declare official intent under IRS rules. That has always been a commission action. Our new bond counsel, Foley, looked at our processes and said, most people don't do that. Most people delegate that to staff because it's fairly routine, and then you can do it faster. So that's what we're recommending.
Okay. Dan.
What is it actually? I don't understand. I mean, we're giving the intent that you can do something, but what do you have to do?
Sure. So I'm going to go a little bit out of my knowledge zone here, but the basic policy concept, what we're doing is complying with IRS rules. And the basic point here is for tax-exempt financing, you are taking advantage of the tax exemption, which is based on the fact that you are using this money for a particular capital governmental purpose. And if you were to use that money for some other purpose, for instance, investing it in the stock market and making a lot of money, you would be going against the public purpose of tax exemption. And so these rules, the various rules of which declaration of intent are one, are designed to make sure that governments are not doing that, that the money is being used for a public capital purpose. The specific issue is that you have often started spending on a project before you complete the financing. and you want to be able to go back and use the financing to cover those initial costs. That is always true with Clean Water Fund financing, which is paid on a reimbursement basis, but it can also be true of just straight general obligation bonds. So the terms of the Declaration of Intent put time limits and percentage limits on how much you can go back in time and cover previous spending. So that's what's going on here.
Okay. Brad.
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Motion by Commissioner Murphy, second by,
Commissioner Buckland, I'll second.
okay. Motion by Commissioner Murphy, second by Commissioner Buckland to approve the policy authorizing representatives to declare official intent for reimbursement of federal tax law purposes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Oh, roll call, that's right. That's right.
Commissioner Buckland,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeze,
Aye.
Commissioner Hovell,
Aye.
Commissioner Lonkella,
Aye.
Commissioner Lytle,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Pulse.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. That will take us to the Badger Mill Creek Area-Wide Water Quality Management Plan Amendment Approval Update. We're not going to discuss the lawsuit. It's mainly to discuss what's been happening with the project. So, Marty?
Right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Double check this here. Yes, I might need your assistance, Amanda, so I was just double checking if it's not working. So you gotta teach. Oh, did I have it backwards? Okay. So there's an orange circle to tell you which button to push, but there is no arrow to tell you which direction to hold it. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marty Griffin, Director of Ecosystem Services. So it's been a while here since I've been able to provide an update on Badger Mill Creek, so that's what I'm going to do here today. And I'm going to provide an initial update on just the additional data collection and analysis that we were asked to do as part of the DNR's approval of our area-wide water quality amendment. And so, as Commissioner Hovell indicated, this is a separate process than the legal challenge to the DNR decision to approve that amendment. So first, I'm just going to go through some of the things that we've done in the last few years. This time. Yes, thank you. So as you're aware, the district is faced with stricter phosphorus standards in our discharge permit that apply to outfall 5. That's one that discharges to Badger Mill Creek. So to address this challenge, we did undertake a multi-year phosphorus reduction initiative called Project Plus at Badger Mill Creek. And this focus included community engagement efforts and listening, with water quality being the top of our priorities. And our goal really was to achieve our phosphorus compliance standards with the most certainty, minimize harm to the biology of the stream, and maintain fiscal responsibility to our customer communities. As through our analysis, we did find that the capital cost to build treatment to remove phosphorus to Badger Mill Creek would be approximately $24 million. So the district's decision to discontinue the outfall 5 and consolidate the outfall locations at outfall 1, which is our Badfish Creek outfall, was the best of the 3 final options that the district assessed for phosphorus compliance. And through those assessments, we found that the watershed compliance options weren't feasible based on the limitations by DNR, and maintaining the discharge at outfall 5 would require tertiary treatment, which has high short-term and long-term costs that will be borne by ratepayers and our customer communities. And we knew that the district would continue to meet our permit requirements in Badfish Creek if we consolidated the outfall locations to outfall number 1. So just to recap the timeline here, that decision was made in May of 2023. In June of that year, that's when we sent our application to CARPC and DNR to amend the water quality plan management plan. And then there was that subsequent recommendation by the CARPC Commission to deny that amendment. And in September, the DNR did approve that amendment with conditions. And so those conditions asked us to turn off the effluent and conduct additional analysis, which I'll share in a moment. And then we did send our initial draft report to DNR earlier this year, and we're working with DNR to continue to refine that and provide additional information to make sure before we finalize that. So the main reason we're here is to really talk about that data collection and modeling that was requested by the DNR and provide that additional information on the impact of discontinuing the effluent, specifically on dissolved oxygen concentrations in the stream. So to do that, we did hire a consultant, Ramble, that's currently assisting with our permit reissuance process, and they assisted us with doing this analysis to fulfill that requirement. So we know dissolved oxygen is important for water quality. It's essential for aquatic life to support reproduction, growth, and activity. And the district collected dissolved oxygen data with the effluent off, and then we had our consultant Ramble conduct a modeling analysis using that information. And so state administrative code does identify the DO concentrations, dissolved oxygen concentrations that are required to support the designated uses for the stream's aquatic life. And so a water body designated by DNR as like a limited forage fish, which is the designation for Badger Mill Creek, should attain a minimum dissolved oxygen concentration of 3 milligrams per liter. But for full fish and aquatic life waters, the criteria is 5 milligrams per liter. And for cold water streams, the criteria is 6 milligrams per liter. And I will note that even though there's been some discussion about the actual criteria designated by DNR for this particular stream, I do want to point out, cold water streams, the criteria is 6 milligrams per liter. And so that's what the standard that we like to hold ourselves to. And so that's the number I want you to keep in mind as we go through some of these results. So here we go, getting into the results. So these are two tables. These are the results of the modeling analysis. Okay, so there's two tables, top and bottom, one's shaded in blue, one's not. There's two tables because we ran two analyses. The top table is the results showing inputs into the model that were reflective of normal stream conditions and dimensions. But we know that streams are dynamic, we know that things change, and so the bottom table is simulating like a change in morphology or dimensions in the stream and looking at the model and what the results are there. So that's why there's two tables. Each table does show results for the model for the dissolved oxygen expected to be in the creek with and without the district effluent. That pinkish, purple shaded area, that's the model results, and the dissolved oxygen results just for the creek only, right, without the district's effluent, right? And then each column, we ran multiple analyses simulating different dissolved oxygen levels in the stream that were within the range typically observed at the USGS gauge that's on the stream. This helps simulate the impact of the district effluent on the creek at different dissolved oxygen conditions. And so those stream model runs for the different dissolved oxygen conditions were not intended to reflect any specific actual dissolved oxygen levels in the creek. Again, they were just within the range typically observed at the USGS gauge, and it helped us just simulate the impact and look at the impact of the effluent at different dissolved oxygen conditions. So that's what we did. The results showed the expected dissolved oxygen concentrations about 2.5 miles downstream of outfall 5. We did this also to determine how the impact or the initial dissolved oxygen levels in the stream had on the downstream dissolved oxygen levels, because we wanted to figure out if the creek had the ability to assimilate the organic load that's present in our district's effluent. So you can see here by looking at those shaded numbers compared to the non-shaded numbers for all the scenarios we ran, that no matter what the dissolved oxygen concentration started at in the stream, the concentrations for dissolved oxygen are always predicted to be higher with no district effluent. That's what this model is showing us.
Just a quick question, Marty. Thank you for this. The USGS point of getting the DO values, how is that collected? Is that like a continual DO, or is it, how often is a DO
Okay,
measured?
so, yeah, good question, thank you. So just to be clear, this slide is not showing any USGS data, okay? The USGS has a gauge that is collecting data. I will be showing some of that data a little bit later. I mentioned the USGS gauge just to show that we looked at that data set to say, what is the range of dissolved oxygen that we actually see to know what model runs to use. The DO data at the USGS gauge is collected at 15-minute increments or even something faster. It's very instantaneous. 100% correct. So thank you, Commissioner Bookland, because that was the most amazing segue into my next slide. Because this slide actually is showing the USGS in-stream data. And so that gauge of that Bruce sheet is downstream of outfall 5. So this data, a graph, is showing the times when the district effluent was on and off. So the gray bar is when district effluent was on. The blue bar is when district effluent was off. Each groupings of these bars represent a different month. So each of these groupings represents the month of August, October, and December, going from left to right. The dissolved oxygen concentrations represented on the graph are the average of the monthly averages for the month spanning multiple years of data sets. So for instance, in the gray bar for August, when the effluent was on, we have data sets spanning from 2020. So we took the average, the monthly averages for all those years. For the blue bar, the effluent was off. That data set represents August 2024. So you can see that the blue bar is always higher than the gray bar, which shows that the in-stream data also shows that the dissolved oxygen concentrations increase when there's no district effluent. So we also wanted to look a little bit deeper at August because we know August is a traditionally hot month. Looking at the USGS data, that's the month that we always see historically lowest dissolved oxygen levels than other months. That's due to increased plant growth, respiration, all these things happen biologically in the stream around this month, so that's what drives dissolved oxygen levels lower. We really want to specifically look at this month because it represents hotter and drier environmental conditions. Again, same situation, gray bars are when the time the district effluent was on, blue bars are when the effluent was off. In this particular graph, each bar represents a year starting in 2020 and going through 2024 from left to right. This data is showing the dissolved oxygen concentrations of the average of the daily values for each of those years. So that's the average of the daily values from 2020 all the way through 2024. This allows us to compare the August data year over year to see what's going on. Again, when looking just at August, when you look at the in-stream data, the dissolved oxygen concentrations is always higher when there is no district effluent. So this tells us that both the data collected and the modeling analysis demonstrate that Badger Mill Creek will continue to meet the dissolved oxygen water quality standards when there is no district effluent. It shows that the discontinuation of the discharge will result actually in an increase in dissolved oxygen. And the model results are supported by that USGS gauge data for Badger Mill Creek that also shows without the district discharge, the average dissolved oxygen concentration increases. So while this data collection and analysis are complete, the effluent is off, and this has provided us an opportunity to monitor and see the results in real time. We've taken several photographs along multiple locations since August, and some of those photographs you saw here in this presentation. And these photographs do show that there is sustained flow absent the effluent discharge. So with this visual evidence and the additional data collection and modeling, it's evident that discontinuance of the effluent has not created any harm. And we remain confident that our choice to discontinue the effluent instead of spending over $24 million of ratepayer dollars to build tertiary treatment is the right decision.
Commissioner Lytle, you got a question?
Thank you, Marty. That's a really helpful presentation. Final slide you showed with the graph looking at DO trends across years. It seems like there was a trend happening of increased DO measured in the creek even prior to the change in conditions and turning off the effluent flow. So it's curious to me to necessarily conclude that the elimination of the effluent is what caused the increase, as opposed to just, again, it's the same month in 2024, but 2021 to 2024, we're seeing a pretty good trend of increased DO anyway. So, you know, how were we to say that we wouldn't continue to see that trend regardless of whether there was flow or not.
I would 100% agree with you, because we're not actually saying that removing the effluent discharge is going to increase dissolved oxygen. We're saying removing the effluent discharge is not going to have an impact on dissolved oxygen. And you've actually stated that absolutely correctly, so thank you. Oh, okay. I just had one more thing to go over, just next steps, what's happening right now. So we're actually working with DNR right now to finalize that information I just presented. And so we're working with them to make sure we get that completed. So we'll report back and let you know what's going on with that. But again, all this is happening, we're setting aside the legal challenge, but that still is there. And so we're hopefully that information here helps inform some of that work. But the stakeholder group that we worked on that I talked about before, that still remains. And if you remember, in December, the stakeholder group presented to the commission about the finalized project portfolio. So that's still out there. We still want to do that. And so the commission will have an opportunity to look at that information once the legal matter is resolved and this amendment is approved. So that will be some next steps to look forward to.
Thanks for the presentation, Marty. Was DNR asking us to look at anything else besides dissolved oxygen in the conditions of the approval from last year? Or was this really the main thing? I should know, but I've been paying no attention to the DNR side of this and keeping this head on my head. So I'm in the dark and asking a very innocent and honest question.
Good question. Dissolved oxygen was the only water quality parameter that they're required to look at under the code for the water quality amendment approval that they asked us to investigate.
So can I ask a quick follow-up? The sciencey part of me is curious. Do we have an explanation or theory as to why this results around dissolved oxygen? What's going on? I'm thinking in a very basic way, you go past the outfall and see all the bubbling aeration, which we've always done intentionally, I think, to try to do something about dissolved oxygen. But then we find that actually our discharge cuts the other direction. It harms dissolved oxygen level or lowers dissolved oxygen levels. So what gives? Do we know?
Well, I think we do know. And it has to do with the organic material in our effluent, the biochemical oxygen demand. So, you know, that biochemical oxygen demand, that's the measure of the amount of oxygen that organisms need to decompose organic matter. And so the more you have, the harder it is for organisms to have the oxygen, correct, right? So when we reduce the biochemical oxygen demand, there's less competition, and so there's less organic matter consuming all that oxygen. So we're allowing more oxygen to be available.
Thanks. I just have a related question to Ezra's. So the DO is dependent on the BOD as well as the temperature of the water. So that also, did we measure other parameters besides DO?
So for this particular assessment, we weren't asked to do any other parameters. So at our earlier assessments, we did look at temperature. We used the USGS gauge information because we had that for temperature. So we did look at temperature because that is one of the water quality parameters under NR 102, I believe, for the water quality amendment approval. So that information was looked at as part of the earlier process. And so, yes, I agree with you, and we did look at that.
And so the data makes sense based on temperature as well. I mean, because our effluent will add some heat to the water, so it would raise the temperature a little bit. So the data makes perfect sense from that perspective as well as a BOD loading kind of. Yeah. Thanks.
Ben.
You're showing your hand up on Zoom, Commissioner Lytle.
Thank you.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, just a follow up, and I think Ezra disclosed that he wears a couple hats, and obviously I wear a couple hats in this situation, so I didn't want to pretend that wasn't the case. But I think the question raised during public comment is one that's good to kind of respond to, as far as are we still in a study and evaluation period? And as a result of that, no additional flow is going to go to Badger Mill Creek. If this legal challenge drags on, we have permission to continue to stop that flow until that reaches its conclusion. Just any explanation you can give for the rules around what the flow would be in the interim period.
Our current plans are to keep doing what we're doing, which is discontinuing the flow until everything's resolved, because we don't know what we may be asked to do. So having the ability to even continuing right now, having the USGS data, continuing to get information, I think is beneficial for everyone. So that's our current plans.
Brad?
I was just curious about whether we're continuing to monitor the DO levels and are planning to continue to do that into the future. Kind of curious what August of 2025 is going to look like.
So we currently do have a water quality monitoring program where we have staff go out to our streams monthly to collect data. We'll still continue to do that. And we know the USGS gauge is going to continue to operate, so we'll have all that data that's continuing to be produced for the stream.
Okay. I got a question or two. So you talked about organic matter and temperature affecting or anything else, like the amount of water from like it gets in, through storm and then the detention ponds release it. I'm sure that probably has more organic matter. But is there anything related to water level that would explain what Patrick had noticed, that the graph, the amount, even with our contribution, the DO continues to increase?
Well, there's a lot of inputs to the stream, and so there's a lot of water coming in the stream, and so I think, yes, those are going to influence how you see the stream respond. I think our particular results weren't looking at flow at all. We were looking at dissolved oxygen related to our effluent, so we know that our effluent influence on dissolved oxygen is not related to the flow and is related more to that organic and BOD.
Then the Verona indicated that now that they know that it's turned off, or that, like that the stream level is, there's less volume of water. Have you any response to that comment about the volume of water? How that's been affected by?
I actually have no response because I have not done any analysis on the volume of water now versus before, what's happening before. There's a lot of inputs to the stream, a lot of variables, environmental conditions, so it's really impossible for me to even speculate on that.
Okay, so the DNR's main concern has been dissolved oxygen, not volume. Or anybody else? Or Dan?
Commissioner Fault, I would expect the levels to be down, because if you looked at all the Madison area lakes last year, they're like one of the lowest levels ever. Even the spring was really low. It's come up a little bit with the rain, but it would definitely make sense that the levels would be down just due to everything else in Dane County.
Right. We had a historically wet May 1st to July 15th, and now we've been in a rather dry period, a little bit of snow and not much. And, even the rain that we got, that 1.5 inches, barely, soil was drying another day. Amanda?
I also just wanted to point out through Marty's presentation, he's had pictures, and staff have been going out to visually capture what's going on at the stream. And Marty sort of mentioned it, but I just want to put a finer point on it, that while, we haven't done an assessment of volume, we do see that, there is still water there and flowing. And so we do have some photos and videos that the staff have been keeping an eye on it from that perspective.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you, Marty. Thank you to the visitors who came for that item. Okay. So, let's see. We next move to the study session, the 2026 budget process and priorities. And that's going to be kicked off by Bill, and then Eric will.
Bill Walker, Deputy Executive Director. A few comments to set the stage. First of all, I am presenting. Our former Budget Officer, Ben Narrett, is not presenting, and I want to just let you know that he has moved on to bigger and, dare I say, better things. The University of Wisconsin's gain is our loss, so I'm going to dig into my memory and remember how to do budgets for one more year while we work on getting another officer here. You have two handouts with you, and the fact that they are one page, they're one page, right? One page each handouts reflects some input that Amanda and I have gotten from communities about ways to communicate information. We're trying out a little bit more condensed presentation. We're hoping that this is useful to you and communities. These will be on our website if they aren't already. Sort of a quick reference. The first one is meant to highlight some of the things that we're doing this year to continue improving the budget process. You can read it yourself, but I will highlight that increased outreach is the big one. The Finance Committee's existence is letting us dig a little bit deeper into reserves policy, which is in a sense technical, but will also allow the district to address one of the major concerns of communities, which is, do you have too much in reserves? So the goal here is to produce a clearer, more precise policy, and that work is ongoing and will come to the Commission. And then, of course, Eric's involvement you will hear more about in a moment. I also want to make a few comments on the key dates item. One thing a handout lets you do is put more detail in than you could do on a slide, and this lets us give a little bit more of a sense of how much is going on behind the scenes at the beginning and the various places that the Commission has touch points, which is another issue that communities have raised. So that is available for you to use or to share as you wish. The rest of this meeting is Eric's priorities.
All right, thank you. Eric Dundee, Executive Director. So first point of order for today is if we could hold questions to the end of this presentation. A lot of what I'm going to present today is interconnected, and you might start having questions pretty early with some of the things I say, and then you might have even more questions about it after I go any further. So if there's very specific slides at the end of this presentation to actually prompt you guys to have discussion on this. What I'm presenting today is my first budget priorities. So the idea here is this is my initial thoughts, the initial priorities for the district for you guys to react to. At the end of this, we'll be talking about what you want to see more of, what you support, what you don't like, that type of thing. So that's how we're going to start with that. Once again, for me, I just want to be very open and explain that with my leadership, I have changed some of the focus of the district here, and you're going to see some of that in this presentation. So as we go through, you might have questions about that too, but hold that to the end. So with that, we're going to get started. So today the goal is to provide a vision and strategy. So here is the ability for the Commission to provide early feedback to the district staff on how we want to go about budget process and some of the priorities. Also want to advise on direction of the budget scenarios. So we have had past comments and feedback about getting input, having more direction in the scenario process, not coming to the end of the budget process and having the final document and kind of having nowhere to go based on timing. The goal is today, let's start that conversation now at the end of May, basically June, and we can move through the next few months and have a much cleaner and easier conversation. The other thing to do is identify the areas where the Commission wants more information. Today is just the initial, here's what I got for you. Not all the data is in this presentation, and I would expect you guys to have more information that you want to look at later. Also very specific is what we're not going to discuss today. So this is about 2026 budget. This is not about a future plan future strategic plan. We're in year 0, I call it, of a strategic plan. Under my new leadership, we're kind of resetting. We need to concentrate on what we have going on right now before we move any further. The strategic plan is something that you guys will tackle with Seth McClure and Bill and I at the end of the year to start looking at future. But for right now, with the timing that we have, our budget process, we have to make sure we're addressing 2026 first before we can go any further than that. When we think about that, we also have to think about expanded services and not extending ourselves into a risk of needing more staff or more dollars for expanding our service at this point. You know, we know what we have to do now. We have a lot of projects in the pipeline. We have needs. So avoiding expanding our service, whether that's to customer communities or to other things that we do at the district, for me, now is not the time to do that. The other thing, very, very important for today, we will not be discussing numbers. So if you guys ask questions like, well, what's that going to do to our rate increase? I will tell you, please stop. That's not something we know yet. You know, it's too early in the process. Yes, we can give you kind of general things to think about in that, but we can't say, yep, if you do this project, it's going to raise the rates this much, or if you don't do it, it's going to do that, or if you add this position, it does that. Now is not the time for that also. So let's get into it. So right now, what I want to do is talk about what my focus is. You may have heard this before. You may have seen this in our district messaging lately, but right now the focus is collect it, treat it, and return it. So we want to get back to the basics of taking care of our complex business. You know, we're about trying to keep the trash and pollution out of our pipes, being able to bring it to the plant, treat it effectively and efficiently, and send it back. And when I say send it back, I mean, you know, all resources. We're talking about clean water, talking about our biosolids program, energy production, struvite harvesting, all those things. So once again, we have a lot of work in our CIP and our operating budget, and the idea is to concentrate on this and not necessarily add new initiatives or programs for 2026 that risk that focus. So how we're going to do that? The idea is to deliver on our commitment. You know, we provide a service for the community. You know, we have our 24 customer communities and our population of over 400,000 people. We want to deliver that service. People know when things go wrong. They don't necessarily know when things are going right. But for me, what I want you to concentrate on is thinking about this as assets. So what do we use to deliver our service? And for me, there's 3 very important things. The people, you know, that's the staff we have here, our partners and our vendors that help us get the work done. It's also the technology, which you'll hear about and have heard about in the last few months. That means software and systems for how we do work. And then what most people go to think about for assets, the equipment and infrastructure. What is it that we actually have here that helps us collect it and treat it? And what we want to do is make sure that we're delivering on that kind of with these 3 legs of the stool in mind. So when you hear today, when we walk through the priorities that I have, these are specific things you're going to hear about. So now that we know kind of the baseline, let's get into what the challenges are. So for us, the challenges are here that we want to address, and we've heard about aging infrastructure, we know about staffing limitations, and we know about our financial uncertainty. Those 3 things here are what I want to specifically talk about today in projects and systems, staffing support, and planning. And as we go through, we'll talk about what we're going to do here. For projects and systems, I think the Commission is well aware over the last few years of the projects we have in the CIP, the struggles and the challenges we've talked about with what project goes first for prioritization, how much money we're spending versus budgeting, those type of things. So the idea here is with one of the challenges is to make sure we all understand here that our staff, our master planning, our facilities planning, community planning data for population, They've given us the roadmap. We just have to be able to commit to that roadmap and do the projects we need to do to keep our service as it is. So one of the ways that we look at this is we have our CIP, our capital improvements plan. Most people look at that and say that's the projects we have going on. But also what I want to show you on the left side of the screen is our district project portfolio. Over the last year, we as district leadership have started to track projects, not necessarily just CIP projects, but other things we have going on at the district. And this is just a small graph or table to show you that. You know, in grand total, we've listed, that's just a list, 378 things that we're working on. There's some things that are complete, inactive, planned, programmed, all those. So it's just trying to give you a little bit of a flavor of how much work that we have going on at all times. With that, we've all talked about these projects for a long time. We have 3 generational projects, I call them, in our queue for our CIP. In the CIP, you obviously know about liquid processing. We have liquid processing phase 2 right now, which is our nutrient project. We also have a phase 3 that's in the plan. That's part of our headworks. So basically where 100% of the flow comes into the plant. You know, that's old and needs to be done. We also have our biosolids project, which you've all learned about over the last year. After last year, we reprioritized for the district and began this project, you know, based on our capacity, weather conditions, all those things. And then we also have our heat and power project. That is also in its facility planning stage, and that's to look at how we are using the resources we get and using them to our advantage. So with that, what I really want to concentrate on with the commission today is that calendar, that 2040. For me, this is for me as executive director, I believe we need to have these 3 projects done by 2040. If we do not, we risk, with population growth and aging infrastructure at the district, we are not going to be ready for an expansion of this plant. We have that data that tells us that around 2050, we are going to have expanded this plant. So if we're not taking care of these core things that we have at the plant right now, by 2040, we're putting ourselves at risk. I realize that's 15 years away, but we know each one of these projects take about 5 years or more even at times to develop. In the background, it's a slight reminder for some of us who look at this quite a bit. The background picture you see is actually our master planning document we did, and this is for infrastructure. This was us looking at the pieces of the puzzle, where we would put a new building, where we would put a new building, a process building. So all of this fits together, and all of the things for 2026 we're really going to be concentrating. So just wanted to really take a minute to talk about that. Also, even at last commission meeting, you heard about the ERP, our Enterprise Resource Planning. It's not just about infrastructure projects here, it's about our technology. You know, the whole world is going through technology changes, and we're not alone there. So for us, the ERP is important because it's how we conduct business with budgeting, accounting, and HR. The other part to note here is this is step 1, technology upgrades. We know we have our computer CMMS, our computerized maintenance management program, which is WAM also. That is right after this. So if we don't concentrate on taking care of this project, we're not going to be ready to do the next project, which is in like 2027, 2028. So, you know, we're taking on these projects that do have risk, but they also have very high value for us as staff. Other things to talk about that are for the CIP, this is really something for the commission to think about. So I said we don't want to add any new initiatives. I also want to limit the amount of new projects that are put into our CIP. If we know what we need to get done, we are aiming to get those things done now. That's a slow process to, you know, make those improvements, but we have to improve every day. But we do have projects like on the left side of the screen, we have our lab. Our laboratory is in, I don't want to say dire, but in high need for renovation. The two pictures you see there, the top left with the red tape on that, that's the safe space for the lab worker that has experiments going on and analyzation right next to them. You know, we have OSHA standards with the chemical hygiene plan that we need to address with that. We also have in the bottom left a picture. You can't see the label, which I'm happy about. To make a joke, Beth can't see what that label is, so we'll be okay. But what you can see is a little rust in those cabinets. Well, we have metals testing. We have very sensitive equipment. Any, you know, aerosols or particles in the air cause lab difficulties. We know our HVAC in that area is not where we want it to be. So that is the one real project that's going to be added. You know, it is not added to start working on it right away in the CIP, but it is something you're going to see new. The other part is we call it liquid processing phase 3. You know, make sure you guys understand what that is. That's Headworks. In the middle, that's the pictures of our screens. So all the influence, so anything that comes in the water here has to go through those screens, and we're trying to get that trash out. And we spend a lot of money right now keeping those going. A lot of things come in, a lot of things can break these screens and do that. It's old infrastructure. It's also in one of the most harshest environments we have here at the district for that. So that is something we need to look at getting done. That is a priority for me to try to do that. It's based on our liquid processing facility plan from 2016. You know, we're already about 10 years after when that project was identified that we haven't done it yet. So there's some risk there. Also on the right is our collection system. We've talked about this a little bit. We have a really good graph there showing you kind of the risk and condition of our collection system. One thing we should talk about as a commission is programs for maintaining our collection system. When I specifically talk about that, I talk about lining projects. So doing our no-dig, relatively no-dig, unless you're doing manholes with it, rehabilitation projects. So save the pipes. If they do not need to be upsized, save the pipe. You know, do the work to now, then you can avoid future maintenance there. Okay, so that's the project. Now I want to move into staffing and support. So this is also another one of those hot button topics we've had the last couple years. So I want to kind of show you what my thoughts are and what we talked about as district leadership of where we're going here. So we have essential work that we have to pay attention to. We have a situation where we have to decide if this is something that we should own as district staff, or this is something that we could get support from. I use the words outsourcing for that. People could use other things, but I have two columns here. When I go through these columns, I'm going to talk about some very specifics here. The idea is for you guys just to get an understanding of where we're at and what some of the initial thoughts are. So one, we've talked about this quite a bit. We have communications. Technically, we have communications as 1.8 staff members. But we need to remember, and I'm not trying to make Amanda uncomfortable here, but she's the number one in the equation, and she's also a director. You know, that creates a little bit of issues for us with workload. The idea here is if we think about communications, we want to relieve project engineers from doing major communications work. Let the project engineers do their work, have support with communications. Instantly, one person there helps 8 to 10 people avoid some things that are not in what I would call the engineering world. It also needs to address the district's needs and my needs for customer community communications. We heard that through the new executive director process. I've also heard that in my one-on-ones. So we know there is a need there, and communities are actually responding very well to that. So the idea of stepping up those communications externally, but then also internally. You know, we are moving a little bit faster here at the district now, so having internal communications is one of my cultural points for us, is to be open and to make sure that we have people on the same page. Also, another position on here is asset management. So we have a situation where we are trying to maintain our assets and aging infrastructure, and without data, asset management is virtually impossible. You can guess, you can think, oh, that looks bad, but you have no idea when it's going to fail, how it's going to fail that way. So what we've been doing actually the last 2 years is we have taken a position and used it to do asset management work. Now's the time to make that permanent. What it is doing is having a dedicated person to track this data, to be able to do this asset management work, and actually give back our maintenance department a position that I personally moved a couple years ago to try to keep up with data. We also know with this position, our new EAM, Enterprise Asset Management Program, so what I talked about after our ERP, the better data we have before that program shows up, the better that system runs from day one. So, and this isn't going away. The idea for us is to have asset management data to help us with CIP projects, to review scopes, to review what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. We're talking about the technical records that we use for data and knowledge. We also have to be careful. Without this data, every retirement that we have here with all that wealth of knowledge is in somebody's head, and when it walks out and it's not on paper, we struggle. So this is a very important one. Also with this is, in the same line, is our SCADA. So that is, for those who don't know, that's our process control programs. That's how we monitor the plant and the collection system and our customer community, some of their pump stations. When the power goes out, we can watch it. When we have issues here at the plant and we're monitoring, that's what that's about. So one of the things we have is we have 2 people in that group right now. Those 2 people switch on and off every week on call for every emergency. Because when that program goes down, you know, we need it back on. They're also stretched very thin right now, managing device upgrades, programming, and configuration for all the projects we have going on. We know we have our liquid processing phase 2 project coming, which basically redoes our whole liquid stream. With all of that comes new monitoring points, comes new programming. We're even talking about, with our new blowers, having machine learning. Well, that creates a new task or a new skill. It also has, in this group, very tight connections with cybersecurity in our IT department. So with all of this, we have to stay current on that. Also, some other mentions, and this is for your guys' consideration, our project engineering. So we have our project engineers that deliver projects. If you guys have discussions about this, and we at the end of this presentation are thinking about, hey, how do we do projects faster, or how do we add more projects to get things done faster? Well, you have to talk about a project engineer. If you don't have somebody to lead the project, you can't talk about adding a new project going faster. And also of note is the past few years I have transitioned from positions, and we have not backfilled one position yet from that. So those are kind of some of the considerations for district tasks that we would not want to lose sight of internally. We also have those things that we can try to avoid adding district staff for. So that's what I have on the right side of the screen for what I call outsourcing. So what we're talking about is IT support. So as we move through these projects, specifically our ERP project, but then also, help desk and keeping track of our staff and supporting them, the faster that we can have IT support for them in any technology issue, if we can avoid the stoppages, people can get their work done faster. We also know we have the ability to use that to our advantage and have a situation where if we have a company helping us do that, that company has a breadth of knowledge that's bigger than one person for us. So adding one person adds certain skills, but not necessarily the same as a whole company's skills. So that's something that I've been looking at with IT and talking through, and they're leading that, is that review of being able to do that without adding staff. The same thing for our ERP. You guys heard that at the last commission meeting about project management, and then also some comments from the commission about support during that. So some of that support does not have to be our district staff. Our district staff has to learn the new ERP also. So getting that support from outsourcing, temporary. It's temporary costs. I say temporary as in, you know, not 6 months, years, but it can avoid that future. Also, maintenance support. So one of the things we're really trying to tackle here is how we can actually do some of the work that's a little more defined faster. And one way to do that is with master service agreements. The goal is to have our buying power work for us, have companies who go through a process, a vetting process with us, and then we can turn to them and get work done. You will see actually coming up here in about a month, 2 months, 2 of those very specific ones for the maintenance department, which is our manhole rehabilitation services. Basically, we go out and do inspections for our manholes. We know which ones need to be updated or broken, things like that. We also have those manholes in streets, next to railroads, in places that it takes a lot of time and permitting to get one manhole casting replaced. So to get a master service agreement with a company who will just, hey, we have this manhole, we'd like you to start working on the plans and the permitting and all that, that avoids all of our staff from going through every one of those steps all the time. The other part is as I said with IT, you're hiring a company who has many skills, and we don't have a specific person who is really good at knowing what manhole and frame needs to be done, but not really understanding how to do a railroad permit or how to do a, no offense, City of Madison traffic engineering permit. So that's that. The other thing we have going on is our organizational alignment. You guys have heard about that. We are doing that currently now with a consultant. That is kind of at the back of our thoughts right now. I mean, we're in the middle of it, but as for the commission, you know, I can talk about very specific needs and things, but I also can't yet talk about what is going to come from our consultant and what we as a commission and myself will talk about for organizational alignment for the district. So I'm not saying that instantly comes with more positions or moving people around. I'm just saying that's a consideration for right now. And then the third part of the stool here is planning. So what I want to talk about is a little more into the budget and forecasting way. So in our operating budget, I'm looking to reallocate our budget into our needs. So this is about prioritizing essential positions and utilizing a cost to continue model. So for next year, what does it take to keep the lights on? You know, and some of those things that we have to talk about are, like I said, moving around some of the operating budget money we have, but then also looking at positions. You know, we know that that's a thing. I think that is actually probably the largest area of influence on the district's work right now. That is the way for us to move things forward or to be able to support the best. Once again, it's not about new initiatives or things like that. It's about having the people in the right places and understanding how the district operates and needs to do that. We also know there's always a market increase. We've had those discussions before. Very, very preliminary. We heard numbers already from our market consultant that were in that 3 to 5% range. We also know last year we had the wage study done and we're told we were right in the range. So that's just an initial thing on our thoughts right now about what that means for us too with those numbers. And then with the CIP, the Finance Committee is working on updating the capital reserves policy. That's going to help us set clear limits and ways for us to forecast the CIP and know how much money we need in reserves and where we need that. So that's all a good thing that we want to keep going. We also know that we have some choices with the CIP, and this is where the Commission will have to weigh in. We are planning to be more conservative this year with project delivery, timing of when the money is going to be spent. The idea here is we're trying to address some of those budget versus spend things. But we also know that it doesn't happen overnight. And we know we need engineers to actually start projects before you can actually get the project done. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the right projects and knowing that it all plays into the same for the CIP and our scenarios. So if we're going to move projects back or we're going to move them forward, all of that plays into this forecast for us as we go through the budget. And then we have this. We have our risks and uncertainties. Unfortunately, with this, we've talked about it a lot. You've seen it in the news. We have to decide how we would do our forecasting and understand Clean Water Fund loans and our financial debt. We have to decide if there's any kind of significant changes we're going to talk about, in our plan for modeling. We also know there's tariffs, and we have many examples of bidding and procurement pricing with that. We also know we have one of our largest projects ever at the district going to be bid. And really, depending on what that project cost comes in on, and all the projects, large CIP projects we do, there's uncertainty there. We don't know exactly what that cost is yet. And then we also don't know about, staffing and organizational alignment. I can give you the specifics of what work that I think we need, but I also don't know yet what our organizational alignment says. So with that, I've talked a lot, but it's time for you guys to talk, hopefully, and discuss. So what we'll do is, on this slide, I'd like to specifically talk about projects and system improvements. I've got a slide after this to talk about staffing, but I really have some very specific questions here for you guys to think about. What's your comfort with the CIP and our project approach? Are you interested in going fast or slower? Are you more interested in just getting the work started so we can get through the process? Is there anything from what you heard in the projects? I realize that was a few minutes ago, but is there anything there that you want to hear more about, you want us to bring back? So I'm going to pause and let you guys talk about projects. Obviously, some of this might spill into staffing, but I do have a slide for that afterwards.
Okay. Beth?
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the presentation because it's helpful to know kind of what you're thinking and ahead. Could you go back to that one slide that shows the projects, that one table that you had kind of at the beginning of your presentation? Yeah. It's kind of toward the beginning. You know which one I'm talking about. That one. So what strikes me, I don't know how you would define projects, but what strikes me is the large number of projects that you have going on. The grand total is 378, 160 active and 24 completed. That seems like a whole lot of projects. And I don't know what you consider a project, if it's a really small project or a large project or whatever, but what strikes me really is the small number of completed projects and the large number of active projects. It seems to me that you've got way too many projects in the pipeline versus how much you have completed. That just kind of sticks out to me. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because do we have too many projects going on for the number of staff we have? And does that hold up, projects? Because that kind of gets into the comments that I've heard from our customer communities about, do we have, why don't we spend what we say we're going to spend? And is that related to this kind of a thing where we we have so many active projects and so few completed projects, if all that makes sense.
Yep, and now I realize I shouldn't have shown this. What you're seeing here is just a snapshot of how we're documenting our work. So just to address very quickly, the completed is only 24. We just started using the spreadsheet. You're not going to see a lot of completed projects on here. This is us just documenting things. This is documenting, I'm going to use it from the microscopic up to the largest. So there's an active project on there for me to go and do one-on-ones with customer community. That's one of the projects. One of the projects is to update one of our admin guidelines. And that ranges all the way up to Lisa and her team trying to pull off liquid processing phase 2. So, yeah, thank you for asking the question. That would have been bad if everybody would have walked out thinking that. I'll remind myself not to put that slide up there again, but, yeah, that's what that is. And really, I do want to spend a minute on the second comment I heard from you about, do we have too much going on? That's why you actually see the inactive and the planned. We have actually started to tell ourselves, nope, we cannot take that on right now. That's not something to be done. So, yeah, please don't be alarmed by the 160. Yes, we are busy. We are very busy, but understand that 130 staff, we have very small things that we're doing at times. We have very large things. But this is just the way we are trying to use to prioritize our work and to track what we're doing. I mean, the idea is to get things done. So go ahead, Bill.
Bill Walker again. I want to agree with all of that. This is not really a budget point, but I do want to highlight from a district management point of view, that tool is extremely important and a game changer. One of the things it lets us do, in addition to knowing what's going on and say no to things, is we use it actively as a management team for coordination. We go through key projects on that list every few weeks. We discover that somebody didn't know something was happening or we need to coordinate things. It has really changed how we are managing the district, and it's extremely valuable in that way.
Just a comment on that. I really appreciate this slide and having kind of a sense of how many projects you're working through and everything. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that. It just needs a little bit more explanation as to what you mean by a project. So it helps to know that there's some really smaller projects in here and some really big projects. Yeah, I think that kind of information for the commission, at least for me, is really helpful. So, yeah, thank you.
Greg?
Commissioner Friso, Eric, I think going to your question that you asked, if I understood it correctly, is, do you want to go faster, which, or at least for capital projects, means more money earlier, presumably, right? Both, and potentially more staffing. But I think the bigger thing for me, and this has been talked about by the customer communities as well, right, is, and I've said this before, our reach has exceeded our grasp in a lot of cases, and I am just as guilty. So Lisa, this is not a knock on you, because I do the same thing, right? I budget out what I want to do, and then for a whole bunch of reasons that I can't control, I can't do that, right? But for you guys, there's a lot of dominoes to fall here in that 2040 plan. So I appreciate and agree with, we got to work on the things we got to work on so that next domino can fall. And they have to fall in, down 2040, that's 15 years-ish. But I also know, like you do, that's not that far away from major projects, right? And you have a bunch of both what I would, in my head, consider public works projects, but you also have a bunch of internal projects that are needed in a large way to support the capital projects that you're doing. So my answer for me to the question is, I want you to go as reasonably fast as you can with the staff you have, focusing on the important things, which I think you are already doing, right? You're trying to narrow the focus here and make progress on the things that have to fall. I'm not saying there's a lot of other dominoes. I see you know, for Beth's comment, right? A whole bunch of things you want to do, and then there's a whole bunch of things you have to do. So for me, the focus is on the have to do and get them done as reasonably expeditiously as we can.
This one thing I want to touch on, you brought up the 2040 project. So I'm getting a little confused here because you have three 2040 projects you mentioned, the biosolids, the liquid processing, and the heat and power. And then you mentioned that you know that by 2050, we'll have to have a plant expansion in place to handle increased loading. But I'm looking at those three projects, and they all they all are affected by increased loading. So I'm trying to get my head around, does that mean that we're going to finish a project in 2038 or 2039, and then within 10 years we have to redo it all because we're doing another plant expansion? That's going to affect the liquid processing, the biosolids, the heat and power. All those things are affected by, you know, the amount of volume that we have to handle. And so I don't want to be, you know, too often here, and I've mentioned this in the past, and it gets my ire up. We do stuff, and then 10 years later, we're correcting what we did. And it also makes me mad when you say that you've got an old headworks, because I remember when the headworks was built. And I know it's under a weird, you know, it's probably the most stressful condition of the whole plant operation, but you know, I don't know that it's all that old, because I remember it being built when I can't remember what edition it was, 6 maybe. But so I'm trying to figure out how all this works together, because that was one of the questions I asked a few weeks ago when we had that liquid processing, to make sure we're not going to be doing something and then having to redo it.
Yeah, so I would tell you that we are doing projects that we're designing for a 20-year life or 30-year life. So, you know, 2040, if we're going to do liquid processing, we're doing liquid processing to do, right now, phase 2, we are doing that based on the loadings and the flows we have now. That is for 2050, get us to 2050. So we're not doing anything that, when you say, you know, 10 years, 20 years, and it gets you upset, I agree. If we didn't have the population increase or the flows and loadings and things that we have going on now, we're doing the projections for that, but that also makes things go at a faster rate. You know, you could do, in this case, I want to be careful with the 3 projects. Liquid processing is about, you know, the loadings to the plant. Biosolids is also about that. But biosolids is also about our storage capacity. You know, when that project was done however many years ago, we're at that stage where we have to look at that. There's new technologies, you know, that we want to look at and plan for. The heat and power project is one of those that's it's about aging infrastructure. We use hot water, thermal heat around the plant. We also use the energy here to offset quite a bit of our energy every year. The goal is, with our facility plan, is to understand where we want to go next. You know, the markets are different, things like that. We know we still want to maintain the infrastructure here because it offsets rates by doing that. Yes, you have to spend money to do that. But to your point specifically, Tom, yes, with headworks at 20 years old, the equipment needs to be updated. I'm not saying like a new building needs to go in and things like that, but this is how we do our capital projects. We're updating equipment. So in that case, it's not as aggressive maybe as what I may have portrayed it.
Okay, another thing is that, for example, I thought I remembered the lab was rebuilt when they did the alterations at the administrative building. Apparently that must not be the case, because that was just done a few years ago.
That
so
is, yeah.
I'm trying to understand, how does the lab get outdated so fast?
I'll address that one very quickly. The lab was actually left out of that project.
Oh, it was?
Yes. So that renovation did not include the lab at the time.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was. One other, I do agree with Greg that we have to align our projects staffing we have. You know, it was a few years ago when Michael was executive director, we approved the budget, and then he came back several months later, said we needed to add 3 more project engineers. We approved that, but my question to him was, why weren't you aligning your projects with the staff you had? And if you knew that you needed staff, it should have been in the budget. And for a variety of reasons, you know, it took a long time to get those rehired. I will have more comments on the staffing stuff when we get to that, but I do agree with Greg that we have to be aligning our capabilities, staffing capabilities with our project spend. Ken, and then Dan.
Yeah, Commissioner Clark, I echo Tom's and Greg's feedback on not overworking, not out putting too much demand on the staff. I feel we've had an aggressive CIP plan for a while here, and if we slowed our roll down in that category, that would help control our annual rate increase as far as the math that I've seen in the past. As far as what we need to do to keep the lights on and treat the water and staff compensation adjustments, those types of things, that's kind of, to me, that would be the priority, and then the CIP would be second. The feedback I have for the district is to rely on the commission to prioritize CIP projects, not a good strategy. And in the past, when I've brought up the aggressive CIP process, it's, well, what would you like us to do or not do? As a commissioner, that's not my expertise for sure. So that has to come internally. But I think you're on track with these longer term projects also. It's just when you fit them in, or when we fit them in, and at what cost. It's kind of a need versus a want. Needs are the electricity, the needs are the compensation for the staff, the needs are treating water. Not that CIP is not important, but then you get to kind of the want. What do you want to do, and when do you want to do it, and at what cost? Sure, Paul. First of all, the key date that you have here, no later than November 1st for the fees, because they have to have it to Dane County the first part of November. They have no time to work on it, so I'd say you need to move that back a week or two at least. I have to have my stuff in like November 8th. That's a little tight for time you get it here and then get it out to everybody again. That's not gonna, they're gonna make some unhappy people. So just to let you know, last time you had it done like the middle of October, that was great.
I can clarify on that. So we do send out estimates middle of October. That November 1st is our legal deadline by which we need to. So that's how, that's why we have our commission meeting scheduled as we do, with the October 30th is the adoption. So yeah, you will still receive, communities will still receive those mid-September. But then the will of the commission and what they decide on the 30th is what finalizes it.
Somehow if that changes a lot, you're gonna want people to be mad at you. It'll be really fast. The one thing you had where you had your, not the priorities, how bad it was. It has a pink, yellow, and whatever it was. That, to me, everything that's close to the salmon or whatever color you call that should be something being next year, I'm assuming. That's what that means. To me, it means that salmon is bad. Green is good. Yellow is eh. Well, I think if you're close to salmon, better have it next year or two, or I could be just an accountant. So.
This is part of that discussion today. You can, if your eyesight is good enough, you can count that many dots, and if you can't, there's 8 of them very close to the line or in the line. Well, if you count the amount of project engineers we have, it's not 8, it's a little bit above, but that's just collection system.
But
So-
if you can take, make an engineer, not a communications person, nothing against communication, that's not what they are. They're internal geeks that do their stuff. Same thing as accountants. We're not good at going out and talking. That's what communication people are. So if you can take 40 hours out of all of them every week, get them to do more, it could be their time better. At least that's what I would. So sometimes hiring people give you a lot of money. Hiring just one person. Okay. I know we're waiting for the thing to come out in June, but that's something I think you should look at on the radar faster than slower.
Yeah, and that's something to be discussed at the next slide too, is with staffing, because with that, you have the ability, and I'm going to say this and then ask you to hold it until we go to the next slide when we're done with projects. But with that, you know, lining projects, having master service agreements, having bigger contracts that for one consultant to do 3 of those dots at once instead of just one at a time, that's some of the options that we're talking about here. And that's somewhat to the point of Tom, Greg, and Ken talking about right-sizing projects or figuring out what your priorities are. You can deliver, you know, with one person, multiple projects, or have that, you have the ability to not add staff if you do that, or you add one staff and it makes a bigger difference. So I'll back away from.
Audrey.
Thank you, President Hall. This is Commissioner Lankelas. So, Director, your presentation is good. I really like that you're saying that going back to basics, right? That's very important. At the same time, you're also doing the new innovations with IT and all of that. Outsourcing is another thing you were mentioning there. When Director Griffin was presenting about the DO levels, and I was wondering where the testing is done, and interesting, that's all, this lab, all of the issues there. And are you also consideration when you're talking about IT, you're trying to use other services? Is that lab is also another thing that we consider outsourcing as well, or that you're considering any of those options at all? Like, you could do a lot more testing, right? So it's interesting that at DNR, when DNR is reporting to EPA, they're doing a lot more than just season level. They're doing algae, EPA, E. coli, and all of those reporting, and it was interesting that we're just doing only DO there. So it's just wondering if you're considering any of that options as well.
Yeah, so actually we do already outsource some of our specific samples for the lab, but for us, you know, as a wastewater plant, we have to have those services on site, most of those, because we're talking about plant monitoring and not just regulatory sampling, but also process sampling. So that's what gives us our indicators for that. But yeah, to your point, yes, we already have some things that go out and are outsourced based on equipment, specialties, things like that. So yeah, we try to concentrate on what are the core things we need to do in-house, and that's what we have our staff and process doing. Oh, yes, and the lab does do more than DO. There's a lot of parameters that they take care of for that.
You brought up the outsourcing stuff, and I've always had concerns at times about outsourcing. I know what you're talking about. I know your point on the maintenance support, but here's just a little story. Many years ago, well before Doge, the Ice Age Trail hiking, and they had 3 groups that took care of the Ice Age Trail: volunteers, the National Park or Forest Service or whatever, and then some areas were contracted out. The areas that were best maintained were by volunteers. The second best was the National Park Service or whoever, the federal government. And the worst kept part was those that were contracted out. And so, you know, anytime you have a contract, you have to have somebody there that's going to still have to go out to the site to make sure they did the manhole correct, and and all of that. So I don't know, I don't know if we're going to be costing us more in the long run. We found that, when we had taken maintenance of of our buildings out, and we brought it back in. So are we going to be playing that game? So I just want to put that in your mind as to how that all functions. And I agree with Dan that, we'd have to really know how much time an engineer will save. They don't have to do communications, but they're still going to have to communicate with the communication staff, because the communication staff will have to be very knowledgeable on the project to be able to go out and answer the questions that the public or whoever they have to communicate with will be having. And while so an engineer is going to be repeating it to the same stuff to the communication staff that they'd be putting out in a public hearing. It might save them a night meeting, but I don't know how much time that it'll actually save. So, that's something you have to calculate is the savings that you would see that you can put engineers, keep them engineering, not communicating, public, going to be that level of savings that you need or not. Beth, you got to...
Just want to build on that, because what would be helpful for the commission in looking at outsourcing versus in-house capabilities is to really, for you to help us define what the core competencies are for the district for maintaining and achieving the basic the basic needs of operating the plant, both now and in the future. And so what I keep hearing is engineering is a key competency. The lab, doing the analysis is a key competency. So just defining those key competencies. And IT is not a key competency, so that's something that you would want to outsource. So I think really, for me anyway, it would be really helpful to know, what you consider your key competencies are, and then that would really help with putting together an outsourcing plan for, and then really kind of helping with that. I also want to say I like the idea of MSAs, because that, master service agreements, because that really helps decrease costs and increase efficiency in outsourcing. So I really like that approach.
Yeah, so I would like to address one thing. So IT is a key competency for us. We need to have those people here. The idea here, when I talk about outsourcing, is I'm talking about that temporary support. We have our ERP process coming, and we know it's about a 2-year project, where our internal staff need to concentrate on that new software, understanding it, training on it, getting the learning on it. What are the duties we could shift off of our internal staff so they can learn that while this is going on? And then one is like an IT help desk support, those general things. So those are some of the details. That's actually something that is going to come to the commission in a few months. But yeah, I just want to be real careful, not to, scare staff. We're not talking about outsourcing IT. IT is needed. You need those people. But what I'm looking at this for is being very strategic about, in the short term, and when I say short term, a couple years, get that support so we don't add people for the future that we may not need later. So hopefully that helps explain that a little better.
It does. Yeah, I think if you could help us understand what the key competencies are that you need to keep and what you need to develop internally would be really helpful for me, because I don't really understand that.
I think that would also work as you go through the organizational alignment. See, are there people doing things that are not key or core that don't necessarily align? You fully have to keep an alignment, because you're talking at least 5 positions if you look at your staff essentials. So kind of going on to the second bullet, if you added one more person for each those 5 points that you had, I don't know that that's going to be doable. I think you're going to have to prioritize to us, say these are our priorities in terms of who we want if we're going to even approve any additional staff. because we have to remember, we're gonna say, every year we're gonna face the same thing. We're gonna, from our customer communities, which is, you know, they're limited at percent growth type of thing through the, tax rule, the levy limit stuff. And they're gonna always be complaining that we're at 5% or not, you know, I don't even know if they would have been happy last year at 5%. Got it down to 7. So we're going to be, I think, more attuned to their desire on that. And one thing too, on the, you know, years ago we hired Claudia as our asset management person. She left, and I thought we replaced her, but now you're telling us that, oh, we haven't had really an asset management person, we just moved somebody into it. So I'm trying to figure out what, when they backfilled Claudia's position with whoever, maybe that person, her professor left too, I don't know. Whatever happened to that, what's that position doing? I mean.
Yeah, this is Bill Walker. Let me talk a little bit about that, give you the brief arc of history of asset management. I think the point to start with is that term is a little bit too broad to handle what we're talking about. The district, starting before I got here, 2014, 15 maybe, developed what was then called a plant asset management plan. And this was a very early attempt for us to get our hands around how one does asset management at this level. We learned a lot of things from that plan. One of the things we learned is the point that Eric made earlier, which is you cannot actually do asset management at that level unless you have basically daily updated condition data on all of your assets in a system that can analyze that data and tell you what to do. So we did learn a great deal about asset management, and we at that point pivoted to growing the data side of the issue. We hired someone who is, actually, you've met him, Matt Schumann, who's running the reliability process group. He and everyone in maintenance have been working for several years to develop our ability to do maintenance practices that support better condition assessment and better maintenance practices generally. And then the second part of that will be the Enterprise Asset Management System, the EAM, which, for reasons having to do with making sure this IT project does not fail, will come after the ERP. So anyone feels frustrated with that pace, understand that we feel at least as frustrated, but that's what it takes to do asset management at this level. And we are, to agree, playing catch-up from decisions made 15, 20 years ago that are what they are. So the roadmap here is continue to develop maintenance's capabilities and implement an EAM. And at that point, we will be able to do full data-driven asset management.
Okay, Brad? And then, I'm sorry, Patrick, too.
Well, good presentation. I can't really find fault with what you're suggesting at this point, although I have to admit it's hard to think about making decisions and choosing one way to go versus another without also thinking about the cost implications and what we're going to be looking at for rate increases next year, which is kind of the bottom line of the budget process. So as far as where we're at today, I think this sounds good. As I'm concerned, I have to thinking about well, what are the decisions that we're going to be making about projects that are going to get set aside and that we're not going to pursue versus those that we think are critical and that must pursue. The 378 projects that you totaled, and I agree that risky showing us that slide because I can't help but think about, well, what are I forget the number of inactive projects that were on the list that we're not working on. What are those? And, we're going to be prioritizing some of those, to move those forward in the future, and will that require additional resources, staffing, et cetera? I'm not going to ask any questions about the slide other than to say that I'm looking forward to the next phase of the budget process where we get into making those choices. I'd like to hear more about staff thinking about projects that we should be doing those projects, but we're not going to be able to, because if we do, we're going to be looking at rate increases over 10%. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to in terms of the budget process. And as far as the dates are concerned, I think they all look pretty reasonable. I appreciate the additional outreach to our owner communities, and I think that will help everyone be better informed about choices that we have to make when we get to October 30th and have to approve the final budget. That's my rambling. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I'm thinking about.
I'll confirm it makes sense, and that's why I wanted to have this presentation now. Just let you guys know what the considerations are as we move forward, so there's a baseline as we have these conversations further. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Paltz, one quick thing is your project graph, spreadsheet, little thing, numbers, I like that. You somehow in the future put hours in there too. So you have 278 or whatever the number was active. Are there a whole bunch that are only 40 hours and they could get knocked off really quick, or are they 1,000 hours? If you could somehow put them, I know that's making more work, but at least to me, 278 is not a big number if they're all small projects.
I'm going to jump in here. This is Bill Walker. This is a fantastic idea, but as the keeper of that, that is one of those projects that is not high enough to get our time. That is a lot of work, so no.
So our project to get projects isn't work.
Correct. What we are doing, this is a very important point. I mentioned it earlier, this is a first step in internal project management and coordination. We're using it as a managerial tool, not a reporting tool. I agree, Eric should not have shown that slide. But it is not a bad idea, and it is on our roadmap, so to speak, to improve the quality of that tool. So, great idea. We love it. But not right now.
If you're trying to sell us to hire more people, that would be a very good thing to have.
And the goal of communicating to commissioners' need is a great goal. We'll probably take a different approach than trying to build a robust hours estimate tool to accomplish that.
And then,
no, keep on.
I was going to say, it seems that this new ERP, that people should be noting on their time card, particularly capital projects, what they've worked on. And so the new ERP should be able to, give out a report as to how much time they put in each quarter or each month, each pay period. I mean, at $6.5 million, I'm looking for that to be a really robust system that can be easily manipulated with just a few clicks of the laptop. Okay, Dan, and then Patrick.
The only thing else was, people want to keep the budget to be 5 to 7% or whatever the increase. If you look at the CIP going out for the next 10 years, that's not possible. So I don't know, pulling stuff forward to make it smoother, that it's only 8% every year. I mean, giving a 5% or a 3% this year and then making 15 next year, you're just pushing the can down the road. So, I mean, that's why when we talked in the finance, we saw those graphs, they look like, and you can't just something to make people happy today and then make them unhappy for the next 10 years.
I think that got to Ken's point about Ken's idea about maybe slowing down the capital projects, making it more affordable for us if we slow them down.
Bill Walker again. We're looking here for guidance, and one of my jobs is to make sure that we're clear what it is. I'm hearing two completely opposite pieces of guidance: slow down and speed up. Can you give us a hint of, you like magic? Is that what you're looking for?
No, I think without seeing the, cost side of things, that, you'll probably continue to hear this, this kind of the opposite, directions that are being suggested. And I go back to, thinking about, the staff, discussions and decisions on, key projects and whether they get into the 5-year CIP or not. And, you know, sharing with, the commission, the thought process that went into choosing to leave some of those critical projects that need to be done, but, you know, they're not going to get done in the next 5 years. We're pushing those off. These are the reasons why. So I look forward to getting more information on that when we get into it.
Ken, you had a response, and then we'll go to Patrick. I promise, Patrick.
Yeah, to Dan's question, I guess my expectation isn't to have a 3% 2026 and then a 15% for 2027. My expectation would be is to take a look at these long-term, large projects and stretch them out farther for the long haul, not just a short blip and then a 15% increase. I don't think our member communities are going to care for that one bit. They might like 3%, but I guarantee you they're not going to like 15. But stretching those out and prioritizing.
I want to continue to prevent Commissioner Pultz or Lytle from speaking. There's a subtlety there which I think we need some clarification on. When you use the term stretch projects, we can interpret that either stretching individual projects, which is what Eric already described, or I put it in words, doing fewer in any given year, so making the entire set of projects take longer. The reason that distinction matters, if you do the second one, you can't meet this goal of we got the key things done before we get to the next major push.
My feedback would be is a blend of both. Correct.
But I think into that is what Greg had brought up about the alignment of staff to projects. You have to tell us you got this 2040 goal. How do we meet that? That's those steps that Greg was talking about, the steps to get to those 2040 goal. How do we do that with the existing staff we have? And how does everything else puzzle pieces start fitting in together? Okay, Commissioner Lytle, sorry about that.
Thank you. I guess not to chime in for the sake of chiming in, but my day job is helping organizations figure out how to get better at efficient and effective capital project delivery. And I want to say, Eric, I think you are pulling on all the levers available to you. And I think it's really refreshing that you're getting back to the basics, as well as, you know, recognizing there's a people, process, tools, all of those need to be looked at. So to say I'm in general agreement with all of the questions on this slide. One minor comment I was going to make is on your essential work slide, the left-hand column lists some in-house capabilities. And I think it's probably important to stress that that is not a comprehensive list. That is a list that you're kind of reevaluating and trying to rebalance with a little extra focus, as opposed to saying that if it's not on the left-hand side of that slide, it's no longer going to be a function within the district. So I'm assuming that was what you intended, but I just wanted to make sure no one took the wrong message away from that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. Great presentation, Eric. Yeah, there's so many good things have been said. I tend to agree with all of them. Bill, I think the resolution to your conundrum, I think the constraints, don't mean to speak for everybody, but I have the sense that the constraints we mean to impose on you are keep it single digit, lower the better, and smooth. And beyond that, we look forward to the next iteration when you come back to us and tell us about the combination of staffing and project delivery that stays within those constraints and you feel best addresses the needs of the district through the lenses Eric presented further today. I don't know how helpful that is, but that's the way I'm looking at it. And the devil's in the details. We'll go through the positions one by one. I mean, you will first, and then you'll come back and you'll prioritize and kind of rank them for us, I hope. And the same on projects. Ken said it, we're not in a position to really get into, nitpicking this project versus that project. We expect you to come back with a recommendation for the next year's budget that kind of optimizes all those moving parts for us and gives us something that fits within the constraints. I will say I'm noting, I've been worried about, maybe that's a little too strong a word, but, Eric's last two positions have been vacant for a long time. There's some other pieces in there. So definitely this sort of structural, a little bit behind on the staffing front is nagging at my brain. So on the staffing side, that piece is real. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you come back with on that front. But I feel pretty good about where we're at on the project side. I know I've seen staff do a really nice job of sort of trying to steer back, not oversteer, but steer back a little bit from that point where we were budgeting for a larger number of projects than we could really deliver. I don't want to see us overcorrect. I think we could overcorrect on that and make a really big mistake, but I don't see you guys doing that. I'm glad to see you kind of making a really prudent sort of reaction to where we were a couple years ago. So it all feels like it's going in a good direction. The devil's in the details. So next few dates in the process are going to be exciting for all of us, I think. I do have a question on the key dates, just sort of picking up where Commissioner Pulse was earlier. Is there, Bill's gonna have an ulcer when I say this, but is there any way to move everything up so that we're adopting on October 16th instead of 30th and making probably our customer community substantially happier, but our staff could substantially less happy? Tell me why that's a terrible idea.
I'll make two comments here. Forgive me for disagreeing with you, Commissioner Pulse, but that date has been forever. That's a statutory date. The addition of that line up there that says estimated 2026 service charges to communities was our solution to please give us some information earlier. That was done in response to the fiscal work group that Ben led a couple years ago. We asked that question specifically. We've continued to ask it in meetings with communities. Our understanding from people is that earlier date is meeting people's needs. The issue of getting the budget done faster, let's see, what do I want to say here? There are 4 commission meetings. Whether you need all 4, I think, is a commission question, not really a question for us. We will have the budget essentially done at the introduction point on September 11th. So if speed is desired there, I think that's a question for how much engagement the commission wants to have. And in terms of if we wanted to speed up the earlier part, that would be a more fundamental change in how we do business that would take some thought.
Well, I guess in looking at the schedule, my only thought was that we have a public hearing scheduled on September 25th, and then October 16th is a budget deliberation. There is no meeting between the 25th and the 16th, I would imagine. But depending on the results of the public hearing, you could think about maybe having commission deliberation as part of that September 25th meeting. But I don't know if that's possible, and the other part of it is giving enough time for anybody that wanted to comment on the budget time to do it. If it's introduced on September 11th, basically that's 2 weeks for people to review it, discuss it, and get us comments on it. I don't know if that's sufficient or not, but I don't see a lot of wiggle room in the schedule that you've.
One more comment on this topic. Ask versus spend. I know that came up earlier in the conversation, but I think I've heard is that's equally important to our member communities, that, hey, you request the funds, whatever that amount is, for a year, project doesn't get completed or worked on for 18 to 24 months, and that's a slush fund, not a request. So tightening up that process, I think I would assume is equally important to member communities that are zeroed in on a percent increase for a.
Okay, I want to bring this up. We had heard a lot of this at our customer communities, is that they said that we should, some of them anyway, have always indicated we should be setting a maximum rate increase and then having a budget that comes in to meet that. And when we hired Eric, he threw out a number last December to us in our interviews. Is there any interest in setting up, we've never done it before because we always felt that, you know, our needs should be driving the budget. But, you know, our customer communities, owner communities, they obviously have to do that, go for a referendum. And that's kind of this, regardless of whether or not it's an appropriate bar to hold us to, that's kind of almost what they're holding us to. Let's face reality. So is there an interest in doing that? Right.
So, I would suggest, at least from a budgetary perspective, if you did that, so looking at the capital projects that Eric and Lee take on here are really uneven, meaning you have these huge, big asks, and then you might go for 5 years with, you know, smaller projects. If you're trying to hit a target, because this happens to me, right, at the City of Madison, I am under exactly what you described here. So for me to budget a project that is huge, what I have to do is exactly what Ken doesn't want me to do. I have to get I have to use budgets for 5 years maybe to squirrel away slush fund money that is then authorized. And it really becomes difficult because it also makes transparency very hard. Because to know that then I have the authorization, say in 2030, to bid a project, and you say, well, Greg, where did you get that authorization? And I say, well, from 2025 to 2030, I put away $2 million a year in prior authorization so I could bid a $10 million project in 2030. Yeah, no, I know that, and that's perfectly legitimate. This question has come up during budget discussions, right? When I have to budget a project that is beyond my means in a single budget season because of budget limitations, that's the only way you can, because to some extent, so I think what that would do if we said, well, Eric, you can't come in above this number. When I have to do a major plant expansion then, to do that, I would have to plan potentially 2 years or maybe even longer to do that. That makes it a little harder for people to follow, one, and it also makes it harder to plan. And so for me, the answer to that is not necessary. I wouldn't necessarily support that here because it puts some artificial constraints, and it also makes it hard to then explain, to your point, Tom, to alderpersons who are new on the council, well, where did you get the money? And the answer is, well, 4 years ago, I got the money, and I've been carrying that money as prior authorization. Now, it doesn't cost the city money because I don't borrow that money if I'm going to do the project, but it is on the books. So life just gets more complicated, in my opinion.
Seems like it gets to an issue of when the debt service is also issued. You know, you have your planning costs and design costs, and debt services, when you issue that, that's where the big bills start coming. Anybody else have any thoughts? Ezra?
I have to run at 10, so I'll just chime in. I'm not a fan of that approach. I like the nuance. It makes it nuancy, and nuance is hurtful to our brains, but it's the right way, to my mind, to go about it the way we do it. where the needs, the priorities, and we sort of massage all that, and we look for the smoothest and the most palatable budget, but that meets the needs with the specifics in there. I've been happy with that approach, which we've generally followed the whole time I've been here, and I don't think we should put an arbitrary sort of cap or limit on it.
Yeah, this is where I'm gonna ask you guys to have this conversation in a couple weeks when we have the community meeting and we have our representatives here and the commission here. You guys are starting to get into that topic of setting a rate, not setting a rate or a cap. That's exactly the kind of conversation we want to have in a couple weeks. So, just in the interest of time, so you guys don't go too far.
No, I understand
yeah.
that. I just want to try to get a feeler out first before we get there on weeks. Ken and then Dan.
Well, I voted no for the last 2 out of 3 budgets that we voted on, but I'm not a fan of this. That's a great question. I'm not a fan of that strategy. I think for an entity like the district who covers a huge area, not just one municipality, I think you lose your flexibility when you have a project that you absolutely need for whatever reason. But
The Nine Springs interceptor problem that we had over in Fitchburg, Verona area. I know that all of a sudden became a much bigger project there in Sinkhole. Dan?
Yeah, to go off your point, we need, assuming they do, they have to budget for these things because they're gonna happen every year. I mean, I don't know what that is, but I think your point of keeping a set dollars could work for the operating part, that within a 5 or 7 or whatever percentage. The CIP, you need to look at needs and wants in the next couple of years. I think you need to pull the two apart. You can explain it better that way because, you know, our maintenance and stuff like that, we're keeping within the 3% or 5%. But due to these things getting old, you need to pull these ahead 2 years or something like that. So if you could pull it apart a little bit, I think it might be easier to explain. And it makes sense because you better be working on your needs now, not pushing them out because you think you only have this much to spend.
Okay. Anything else? Is anybody going to not be here on the 11th of June? That's a Wednesday. That's the Wednesday before our next meeting. So, all that. Anybody else have anything on this? It looks like Ezra's got to take off. Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. And Bill, do you have the information you requested?
Yeah, I think we're good. This last slide was just to kind of reiterate that, and I think you guys did a great job of that. So for the future discussions, we're going to come back, already planning to come back to talk about operating budget, CIP, overall budget, you know, in maybe steps, maybe all in one meeting. We'll see how we're going to do there. But then, yeah, I think right now for us, the action items, we've got plenty of notes. It's later, so we'll work on that and come back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to reports. You had a couple reports.
I did, and I think I left some of that at my other position today. So for executive director update, 2 things. One is, well, actually 3 things. One we already talked about. The budget listening session is coming up in June. Thank you for mentioning the date for that, President Hovell. Number 2 is that we just started this morning our employee engagement survey. So that just started, so look for that coming to the commission in a couple months. And then my last one is, with support from the executive director performance subcommittee, I have selected executive director coach, and that is currently going under contract. I'm bringing it up now because it actually came in under the commission's transaction approval amount, but I just want you to be aware of that. We do have a memo. We had 30 total proposals, 24 were reviewed, so we went through a pretty arduous review and scoring. If you'd like to see that, I have that, but that's just the update there.
One additional point on the information session, look for some material to come out by email to you with some more details and a little bit of homework for you to do. And I believe that's coming today. Is that correct, Cassie? That's coming today.
Okay, the committee reports. Ezra had to leave. Is there anybody from the Personnel Committee have a report? Your next meeting is tomorrow at 2 p.m.
So Ezra leaves and Commissioner Clark, Ezra leaves and Brad steps out. I guess I'm the... We have a 2 p.m. meeting tomorrow. I think we made some progress. We're going to talk about consultant process moving forward. But that's about... Eric, anything I missed there?
Nope, you got it. Yeah, this next meeting is about getting an RFP out for a consultant to help with the annual review process, to go through that.
We're trying to find a consultant process that helps us get the train on the tracks, and Commission can handle the whole review process after that.
Okay, great. Finance Committee report.
Yeah, we made some pretty good progress. So we have been working primarily on recommendations to update the capital reserves policy. Currently, what's in the handbook or policy book, thank you, Bill, is not what is recommended by the same firm that's doing our bond, helping the district with the bonds. And it's also not what we have been generally following, since it's not what is recommended by most professionals. So we finished, and I think we have a recommendation on the capital budget, one at the last meeting, after some really interesting and good discussion. The next meeting, we're going to cover the operating and debt reserves, which I think is going to be somewhat perfunctory. Those are a lot simpler than the capital reserves project. And then following that meeting, we're going to come back to the commission with a series of recommendations. Those are we have a whole bunch more to do after that, but those are big things, and they hit the budget that is coming up. So commission would help us take action on that to help Bill and Eric when they set their budget. Your next meeting is operations.
Good morning, Commissioners. Alan Grooms, Operations Manager for the district. I'll be giving the operations report for the month of April. Excuse me. Yep. Getting a little ahead of the... Right. There we go. Okay. April plant performance, everything... all our parameters were kind of within the band there that represents the 3-year average, around the standard deviation around the 3-year average for those parameters. Total suspended solids 5.8. Ammonia has come down to about 0.3. A little bit warmer weather has helped with that, but that's a pretty historical number for us. Phosphorus numbers remain good, 0.29. Fecal numbers are almost remarkable, 30. That's kind of typical at the early part of the season. We've got pretty good clean equipment. It's all ready to go for the new season. So those do tend to degrade a little bit as we get farther into the season. We start seeing a little bit more. The solids numbers tend to climb with a little bit warmer, a little bit of denitrification in the basins, and so then that tends to lead to a little bit more solids, a little more phosphorus, and a little bit harder to get good disinfection numbers. But the newer system's done a great job overall with meeting performance, meeting our permit requirements. So any questions on this slide? I don't really have anything. It's kind of liken it to, and I think that's it, kind of medical reports. It's like you always want boring, and operations reports are the same way. You'd like them boring. So, all right, thank you.
So, and we're taking a quick pause because our president and vice president is not here. Tom is back now.
Regulatory and legal?
Good morning, Vanessa Wishart, legal counsel for the district. I don't have any regulatory updates today. We did the regulatory update at the last commission meeting, and nothing particular to update from what was included in that packet for the prior meeting. On the legal services side, we are continuing to work on Badger Mill Creek litigation. And as Marty said, we're also working with the district on working through the conditions for the plan amendment approval for Badger Mill Creek. We're also continuing to work on sewer use ordinance updates. And I think there'll be more information for the commission in the coming meetings on those updates. And then we've spent the last month working on a number of professional services agreements. If you recall, we helped the district update the kind of a standard PSA last year over the summer primarily. And so now we're working on implementing that agreement for different professional services contracts, which has been, I think, a fruitful effort to get that agreement standardized. And then we are just beginning the ERP contract work. So we have a kickoff meeting coming up here, and we'll be anticipating that that'll be a fair amount of legal work on the ERP contract negotiations side of things. Happy to answer any questions on legal services, or if there's anything on the regulatory side you have questions on, I can answer those too.
Have any questions?
Yeah, Vanessa, can we get a guarantee on our ERP project from our vendor? I apologize, Vanessa, that might not be a productive question.
Right, probably not, but we'll do our best on the contract side for sure.
Commissioner Lincoln here. So, is the vendor selected, and are you working with a specific vendor, or is that general contract?
The original, or the kickoff meeting is going to be with Barry Dunn, so that was what the commission looked at the last commission meeting, and with staff to discuss moving forward on the vendor contract process.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, future meeting schedule is in the packet. So I mentioned the meeting on the 11th of June, and then we have one the next day on the 12th. So the 11th is actually at 7:30 a.m. That will end at 8:30 a.m. So it's supposed to be about an hour, and then on the 12th is a normal standard time of 8 a.m. I don't know that any future agenda topics came up. Anybody have anything? Any other business? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Commissioner Clark, second by Commissioner Priest to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.